Question. Hi Kim, could you please explain what psychic energy is? And this is a very important question that all spiritual people can really benefit from knowing more about psychic energy. So I'm going to explain it at 3 different levels, and I'm going to start at the most basic. When you eat food, your body takes in this physical substance, that's food, and it converts it into energy. The energy is distributed around your body, and that's why you can move your lips, you can wave your hands, or do whatever you're doing. So in other words, the physical body needs energy in order to do anything. It's energy that drives everything. The same thing in the universe. Energy causes the planets to move. It's energy that is radiated from the sun that gives us life here on Earth. So we can say that there's physical energy that relates to the physical body. But now, why can you think? Why can you have emotions? Why are you even conscious? Well, because beyond the physical energy, there's what we can call psychic energy. Psychic energy meaning the psychology, the mind, the soul, whatever you want to call it. So physical energy drives the physical body, and psychic energy drives the psyche. Now, so this is basic. But why is it important for spiritual people to know about this? That there's psychic energy. I know it raises the question of where does psychic energy come from, but that's the 3rd level, so I'll explain that later. But for now, we're just seeing there is psychic energy. And psychic energy relates to the psyche. So why is it important for a spiritual person to know about what it is and what it does and how it affects you? Well, because what is the mind? What is the mind really? I know a materialist is going to say the mind is an epiphenomenon of the brain. In other words, it's the physical processes in the brain that produces consciousness. But if you're a spiritual person, I'm not going to go into arguing about this here. If you're a spiritual person, you realize that you are more than your physical body. Your mind, your psyche is more than the physical body. And that's why we have the entire concept that we can raise our consciousness, we can exit the physical realm, live in some higher realm, however we see it. And we can go through a process following the spiritual path where we are raising our consciousness. This is because we realize that we are more than the physical body. Because as we are raising our consciousness, we are not changing the brain. We are changing the mind that is beyond the brain. So here's why it's important. Let's say you are sitting in your room, quietly, you're meditating, you're contemplating, you're reading a book, whatever it is. Your mind is functioning because you're using psychic energy. But this energy is sort of internal. It's not really directed outwards, right? You are just having an experience inside your mind. But now all of a sudden you're reminded that there's this person at work who's really been on your case now for several weeks, really bothering you, accusing you of being stupid or not doing your work right or whatever it is. So all of a sudden now you can feel, you have an emotion that's stirred up, it might be anger, and you have thoughts about how you can prove this person wrong, how you can prove that you're good enough. And now, if you notice the shift, it's not an internal energy anymore. The energy is directed out towards the other person. And it may even be a certain aggressive energy that wants that other person to change. And so we now see that psychic energy has 2 aspects. There can be what we might call passive energy and a more active, outgoing, even aggressive energy. So now we realize that as we are going through life, there are other people that are directing psychic energy at us. Their thoughts, their feelings, that they're projecting at us because they want us to change or they want us to live up to a certain image. I mean, it's really quite common Not saying it applies to everybody, but it's very common that women have an issue with their mothers and men have an issue with their fathers. And this means that your parent has a certain image of how you should be and how you should live your life, even if you're an adult. So that means for your entire lifetime, ever since you were a child, you might have been exposed to psychic energy being projected at you from your parent. A psychic projection from your parent, constantly, of judging you, evaluating you, maybe making remarks here and there, and you react to this. Now, you may have several people that are doing this to you. As I said, it could be people at work, it could be family members, it could be your spouse, it could be your children, whatever it may be. So even this can actually affect your life dramatically. I know many people, even spiritual people who have been on a spiritual path for a while, who have one person in their life that they are very sensitive to what that person does or says. Now they may, if they've been on a spiritual path for a while and they've worked on psychology, they may have overcome being affected by other people. But there's still that one person that they can't quite overcome wanting to react to that person. So now we need to broaden this a little bit and realize that no psyche is an island. In other words, what is your psyche? It's actually an energy field. Most spiritual people are open to, we have an aura or energy field around the physical body, and that's actually the psyche. So this energy field, your personal energy field, doesn't exist in isolation. It exists within a larger energy field. On an immediate level, it's your family, the people closest to you that you interact with directly. But if you go up to another level, it can be your culture, your religious group, your ethnic group. But even if you take it to the ultimate, it's humankind as a whole. Because, as I've talked about in several videos, there's a collective consciousness. So, beyond being affected by psychic projections from specific people that you know personally, you are subjected to psychic projections from larger groups, even humanity as a whole. And there are some very aggressive psychic projections that are aimed at limiting you. I talk about this, for example, in my avatar discourses, how many spiritual people have come from a natural planet to help the earth progress spiritually. And we have been exposed to this attack from these fallen beings, as I call them, who don't want the earth to change. And they are projecting very aggressively at us that we don't have a right to be here, we're not good enough, we can't make a difference, we shouldn't even try, and all these kind of things. So if you are to, first of all, have a positive life experience and experience some kind of happiness or peace of mind, or if you are to fulfill your life plan, you have to become aware of these psychic projections. You have to get to a point where they're not holding you back, they're not derailing you, they're not causing you to go into this self-reinforcing spiral in your own mind of trying to justify yourself or feeling bad, feeling you shouldn't do anything, whatever it may be. So you have to become aware of this. And again, when you look at the energy field, your psyche as an energy field, you can see that there are things you can do. Because it's actually parallel to the physical body. You know that you have to protect your body from taking in toxins, bacteria, viruses, whatever. So just as you protect your body from taking in something that harms the body, you just need to learn how to protect your energy field from taking in energetic vibrations, psychic energy, psychic projections that are harmful to you. And there are various ways to do it. I describe in my Spiritual Toolbox playlist how you can invoke spiritual protection from Archangel Michael, which means you are invoking through a specific technique that is in the playlist, high frequency energy from Archangel Michael, and it creates a shield around your energy field so that when a psychic projection comes at you, it bounces off the shield. However, and this can be very efficient. I mean, I started doing this I think it was 1984, I started doing this. And within a few weeks, it had an amazing effect. I felt much calmer. I could fall asleep more quickly. And I didn't have anywhere near the disturbing feelings and thoughts that I had all of my years growing up. So this can really have an effect. But it doesn't work against your free will. So that's why I'm saying, if you have a specific person that always gets to you, it can be because at the level of your energy field, probably your emotional body, but maybe your mental body also, you have a specific tie to that person. So that means you feel obligated to take in that person's psychic projection and deal with it, react to it. And so you can, on an immediate level, if you become aware of this, you can use the decrees that are also in the Spiritual Toolbox playlist to the Elohim Astrea to cut you free from such ties, even ties to the mass consciousness. So this can also be very helpful. For me, again, it was very, very helpful when I started using these decrees to Astrea regularly. I started falling asleep within 15 minutes instead of lying awake for 2 or 3 hours, tossing and turning. So, so that's important. Then the other element of this, from a purely energetic standpoint, is that psychic energy, if it's below the vibration of fear, in other words, energy has different levels of vibration. If it's below the fear-based vibration, it will accumulate in your energy field. So if you have, for example, a lot of anger energy, it accumulates in your emotional body. And the effect of this is that when a psychic projection comes at you that's based on anger, it goes in, it hits that emotional energy that's already there, and because the vibrations are very similar between what's coming in and what's there, it stirs up what's there. And so the more anger energy you have in your energy field, the more likely you are going to be overwhelmed by anger when you get these projections. And that means suddenly the anger takes over your mind. You can't choose to turn it off. You can't choose to not react with anger. And all of a sudden, and you can see this in yourself if you look, there's a person that always makes you angry. And once you are angry, you react a certain way. And then the other person becomes more angry and directs something else back at you. And all of a sudden, you created this spiral. And where does it end? Well, it ends when you decide you are not going to deal with this anymore. And so you can invoke protection to be protected from the energy. You can invoke being cut free, but you can also invoke the transformation of the anger energy that's stored in your emotional body so that the other person doesn't have anything that they can use to pull on your emotions. So these are 3 very important. This is what we can call energetic hygiene. And it becomes very important when you understand what psychic energy is and psychic projections. So now beyond this, because again, you can invoke spiritual light from the Ascended Masters, but if you are choosing to react to a certain person, it doesn't really matter that you have protection. You may be protected from other people's energy, but if there's a certain person where you are choosing, you have to refute what your father is saying, for example, it nullifies the invocations of energy. So that's when you have to do what I talk about in several of my breakthrough playlists and other playlists. You have to look at what is the reactionary pattern, and this is what I call a subconscious self. And this goes back probably to past lifetimes. I explain in my Avatar Psychology playlist how many of us who are spiritual people, when we first came to Earth, we were attacked by these fallen beings. They gave us this birth trauma of coming to Earth. And ever since then, we have had this reactionary pattern where we feel that maybe we shouldn't come here, maybe we don't have a right to be here, maybe we don't have the right to challenge other people, or whatever it may be. It could be different things for different people. So really, you need to, in order to be free of these kind of psychic projections so they don't affect you, you have to find out what is the self you have that causes you to react. And then you have to resolve it. And Masters are given tools and teachings for doing this. I talk about this in several places. So it's something that can be done. But if you don't do it, then you will continue to be vulnerable to these psychic projections. And so you know, it's again one of these things where we have not been brought up to be aware of this. We have not been brought up with any awareness of this. And the way I like to describe it is that, let's say that 200 years ago, people didn't know about bacteria. They didn't know that there could be a bacteria in the water that could kill them. And so therefore you could say this was a kind of innocent ignorance. But what we have today is we have a not so innocent ignorance, because materialism insists that all of this that I've told you about psychic energy is just all New Age mumbo jumbo. Has no reality to it whatsoever. There is no such thing as psychic energy. But this means that they can't explain very severe cases of mental illness, for example, or general experiences of, as I said, you become angry when another person directs anger at you. It's just common experience. They can't explain it because this shouldn't be there. And so you have the choice again. You have to look beyond what you were brought up to believe in order to protect yourself. So this is very important. Now there's another aspect to this, and this is the third level that I said I was going to talk about, and that really relates to where psychic energy comes from and why this is important. Why is it important to know where psychic energy comes from? Right, so I'm going to just be a little bit theoretical here. I know it's a little bit abstract, but still I think it's valuable to understand it. So we have one of the most famous equations in history is this one. E equals mc squared, Einstein, theory of relativity. 1905 he came out with this. But you know, probably from school, from basic math, you can do a little trick mathematically. You have an equation here with an equal sign. You can divide. I had it wrong, it's mc squared. You can divide with the same thing on both sides, right? So you can say E divided by c squared equals mc squared divided by c squared. And this of course means that the c squares over here, they nullify each other. So now we have a different equation. E divided by c squared equals mass. Energy divided by a constant, speed of light squared, equals mass. Why is that important? Because, as many scientists have now begun to realize, this simple equation actually proves that matter is not matter. The world is not made of matter. The world is made of energy. Because what this version of the equation says is that energy of a high vibration is reduced in vibration by a certain factor, and then it becomes mass. Then it becomes physical matter. So in other words, everything is made of, starts as energy of a very high, or a higher vibration than what we call the physical spectrum. And by the energy being reduced, it becomes matter. And the reason, why this is important for spiritual people is that it tells you where to get more psychic energy. Because what did I just say? You can't do anything with your physical body if your body doesn't have energy. Well, you can't do anything with your psyche either if you don't have psychic energy. And psychic energy doesn't come from the food you take in. So where does it come from? Well, it comes from a higher vibration and is lowered in vibration, so it enters your mind. So let me just illustrate that very, very quickly here. We have we know there's something called infrared light, which we can't see. And infrared light vibrates at a lower frequency because all energy is described by its frequency, its vibrational level. So infrared light vibrates at a lower frequency than visible light, meaning we can't see it. Then if you take infrared light and you increase the vibration, you raise the vibration, it becomes red light, now we can see it. If you keep raising it, you can raise it up through the colors of the rainbow until you get to violet light, which is the highest light that our eyes can detect. But if you increase the energy even more, you get ultraviolet, which we can't see. But you can, of course, increase the energy even more, go beyond ultraviolet light, and scientists have already discovered and proven there are many forms of energy beyond it. Incidentally, quantum physics discovered in the 1920s that even the subatomic particles, which are really, is it energy or is it matter, is it a particle or is it a wave? They're still debating that. But they have discovered that subatomic particles can appear out of nowhere, divide, collide again, and disappear. And the way they explain this, at least sometimes this, is to say that there is something beyond what we call matter, the matter universe. And some call it a vacuum state, some call it a quantum field. But more and more scientists are beginning to say that this something beyond where all energy comes from is somehow linked to consciousness, or perhaps even is consciousness. In other words, in the materialist spectrum, right, we have matter, the matter world, which really is a level of energetic frequencies, a spectrum of energy, an octave of energy. And they are saying that consciousness is in the matter realm because your consciousness is produced by the brain. But this doesn't explain what they've already observed, as I said. So, what scientists have actually known, as I said, since 1905, is that beyond matter is a level of energy. So, some scientists have been open to the fact you could say the primal element of the world is energy, which is then transformed into matter, and matter then creates consciousness through the brain. But what some scientists are beginning to say now is that no, because beyond energy is actually consciousness. So consciousness is transformed into energy, which is transformed into mass. Now they're not saying that the brain doesn't have an influence on our minds, but they are beginning to question whether the brain creates consciousness. And there are several books on this, and the best one I have read is this one, Purification, Irreducible. And there's another one by Donald Hoffman, The Case Against Reality. And so you don't have to take my word for it. There's also Bernardo Kastrup is talking along the same lines. So I know I'm going a little bit off on a theoretical tangent here, but it's important to keep this in mind even as a spiritual person, because what we realize with this model is ultimately there is consciousness. And some of these scientists are even beginning to realize that this consciousness isn't some, what should we say, completely impersonal, universal thing, because consciousness is actually a being. It's a conscious being. Obviously, this connotates images of God, but it's really not the traditional God that you see in traditional religions. But what some scientists are open to, including Federico Fashin, because he actually had a spiritual experience, is that there are conscious beings in the spiritual realm in a level of higher vibrations. And out of their consciousness, they've created energy. They have then lowered the energy in vibration until it reaches the physical spectrum. So this means that contrary to this materialistic view, the universe is not a closed system. You have recently had these discoveries that there are galaxies that are more evolved than they should be based on the age of the universe. And you can ask yourself the question, what drove the Big Bang? The energy is needed to do anything in the physical realm. So where did the energy come from? And the scientists will say, well, it was all compressed into this singularity. But what that means is that if there was a fixed amount of energy at the Big Bang, the universe should have expanded for a time and then started contracting. But that's not what they're seeing. They're seeing that the universe is still expanding, and it's expanding at an accelerated rate. This can only be possible if there's more energy coming into the material spectrum. Otherwise, there's no energy to drive that expansion. So again, I know this is theoretical. What does it mean for a spiritual person? Well, again, you have we now see we have a world that at the lowest level of vibration, you have the material. This is your physical body. As I said, in the psyche, you have a level of your psyche that's the emotional mind or the emotional body. It's higher vibrations than the physical. But then even higher vibrations are the mental level. And the highest level of your psyche is the identity level, your deepest sense of identity in relation to this world. But then beyond the identity level is the spiritual realm. So the only reason you're conscious, the only reason why you're able to do anything, think, be creative, is that there's energy coming from the spiritual realm into your identity mind. And it then is reduced further in vibration to the mental level, to the emotional, and even to the physical. So this means what? Well, what drives your spiritual growth? Let's say it's been your goal for a long time since you found the spiritual path to raise your consciousness. What's going to drive the raising of your consciousness? You have to have energy. And it has to be psychic energy. And it has to come from somewhere, and it comes from the spiritual realm. And it streams into these three levels of the mind. So isn't it logical that the more energy you have streaming from the spiritual realm into your mind, the more your consciousness will be raised. Now furthermore, the more psychic energy you have, the more creative you can be. The more you will have a sense that you can actually do something, that you are an accomplished person, that you can do things, you can bring forth something new, for example. The more you will have the mental capacity to think clearly, and the more you will have the emotional drive and the emotional stability that allows you to actually carry things through and get them done. And so again, if you're a spiritual person, whether you want to do something in the world, as many spiritual people feel like we are here to do something positive for the world, or whether you want to raise your consciousness, you need energy. You need spiritual energy that is lower to the realm of psychic energy in your identity, mental, and emotional bodies. And so, how do you get it? Well, part of the energy is coming to you from what I call your higher self, your spiritual self, or your I am presence. This is your real identity, your true identity, which resides in the spiritual realm, or at least in the higher vibrations. And energy is streaming through your I am presence, and that's why you're conscious. So you can say that if you look at people in the world, you can say that there are some people that have a very, very low level of consciousness. They're very selfish, they're very self-centered. And some people are barely conscious because they have reduced the connection to their higher self to where it's just a trickle of energy that's filtering through. And what reduces the flow of energy, it is that you have all these blockages in your emotional, mental identity level, which is the subconscious selves and the accumulated energy. It can also be that you have a tie to the collective consciousness that's draining your energy. Right? So you could look at people in the world and you can say the least creative people, the most passive people, are the ones who have the least amount of energy streaming from their I am presence. Now immediately this is going to raise the question of, well, what about these people who seem to have great energy and power over people like dictators and so forth? Well, but that's not because they're getting it from their higher self. It's because they're stealing it from other people horizontally. So we have to make a discernment there that you can get psychic energy from two sources. One is the vertical, where you get it from the spiritual realm. The other is the horizontal, where you steal it from other people who are getting it from the spiritual realm. So why is it that dictators, for example, always want people to follow them? I remember when I was a child, I watched on television these rallies that Adolf Hitler had, where there was 100,000 people, and they were all screaming, Heil Hitler, and this and that. And the reason he needed to have these rallies was that allowed him to steal energy from the people who worshipped him as an idol, and he used that to then have power over people to start the war and keep the war going until he ran out of energy. And then the German army started losing. So, in other words, if you're a spiritual person, you don't want to be like Hitler and steal energy from other people. And you don't have to. Why would you have to take energy from other people when you can get it directly from your I Am Presence? What does it take to get it from your I Am Presence? Well, like Jesus said 2,000 years ago, fear not, little flock, it is your Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom. Your I Am Presence wants to give you energy. But if your identity, mental and emotional bodies are blocked, it can't filter through. And what blocks it is, as I said, the subconscious cells we have and the accumulated energy. But in order to really understand how this works, we have to briefly refer to, I've talked about this before, I know, Jesus' parable. 3 servants were called by their master who said, I'm going away, I'm giving you each a certain number of talents. Then he went away, he comes back, and he calls them to account, what have they done with the talents? And 2 had multiplied the talents, and 1 had buried them in the ground. And the 2 that had multiplied the talents, they received more in return, but the one who had buried them in the ground, he received less. So, what does it mean to multiply the talents? It means, as I've talked about in many videos, that underlying everything in the world of form is what we can call the one mind, or the Christ mind, or the Buddha nature. And the purpose of this mind is to unify the Creator with its creation and to unify all people horizontally. So it's a unifying mind. So when your actions spring from a certain attunement with this one mind, you are multiplying the talents. Because you may be doing something that benefits yourself, but it at the very least doesn't harm others. And in many cases it actually benefits others as well. So this is multiplying the talents. If you do something that's selfish, especially if you go into what I call the consciousness of separation and duality, you're not multiplying the talents. And therefore what happens is that the amount of energy that comes from your I Am Presence is gradually reduced until there's just a minimum that you can stay conscious. But the more you multiply the talents by doing something for others, the more energy you receive. Now, so far I've just been saying that the energy comes from your I Am Presence. It doesn't really, it comes through your I Am Presence, because it actually comes from the Ascended Masters in the realm that, in the level of the spiritual realm that's right above the physical universe. So it's actually Ascended Masters, and they are evaluating each person, especially when you're a spiritual person and you start working on a personal relationship with the Masters. They are evaluating your progress. And therefore it's at their discretion to decide how much energy you receive. And this means that the more you align yourself with the purpose of the one mind, which is to raise all life, the more you align yourself, for example, with Saint Germain's vision for the Golden Age, the more energy you're going to receive and the more creative you can be. If you have ever studied my websites or looked at how many books I've published since 2002, you can see that this is just one proof of it, not the exclusive proof. Of course, many other people have done similar things by connecting to the Ascended Masters. But I'm just saying, when you step beyond this desire to do something for yourself, but start working at the whole, you will receive more psychic energy. And there really is no limit to how much you can receive. But there is a certain limit, because there's a limit to what your physical body can actually handle, even your mind can handle. Because, and this is something, again, that's important to understand, because right now, your 4 lower bodies, your identity, mental, emotional, and physical body, are at a certain level. You have a certain amount of energy in your emotional body, for example, fear-based energy stored there. You have a certain amount of the subconscious selves and beliefs about yourself, and you have a certain sense of identity. Now, if the Ascended Masters were to release maximum amount of light to you, you wouldn't be able to handle it. You would simply, you would go crazy. And you actually see people This is what Jesus meant 2,000 years ago when he talked about those who take heaven by force. You see people who have tried to force what they call a kundalini rising, for example. I've seen this happen in the meditation movement, in transcendental meditation. I even experienced it myself when I was on this teacher training course. And you force the kundalini up, but you're not ready to handle it. So it can have very disturbing effects. People can literally end up in a mental institution. They can end up being so pacified they can't do anything. So that's why when you start working with the Ascended Masters, they are very careful to adjust the light that you are receiving to what you can handle. And therefore, the more you work on purifying your emotional, mental, and identity bodies, the more light you can receive and the more creative you can be. So that's why when you understand this, you realize that psychic energy at the basic level, you can talk about energetic hygiene, protecting your energy field, purifying your energy field, cutting yourself free from any ties to the collective field or even from lower forces. But at the next level up, it's about increasing the amount of psychic energy that you receive from a higher source so that you can raise your consciousness and be more creative. You can say that if you have a dark room and you increase the light, gradually increase the light, you can see more and more in that room. So obviously the same applies to your psyche. The more light you receive from your Ascended Masters, the more you can see what's going on in your subconscious mind, see your subconscious selves and your limitations. But you can also see beyond your mind. You can have a clear vision of the spiritual realm, a clear understanding. I mean, I have experienced over the many years I've been on the spiritual path that it's so much easier for me to understand and grasp spiritual concepts today than it was 30 or 40 years ago. Back then, I remember you would read a spiritual book and sometimes you read a sentence 3 or 4 times, yet you couldn't grasp it, what was being said. And now, many times I just read it once and I understand it, and I might even see something beyond what's expressed in the words. So, of course I know many other people who've gone through the same, so I'm not trying to use it to put myself up, I'm trying to use it as an example of what you can achieve as well. And that's why, just in a conclusion, again I want to say, I don't think you can make maximum progress as a spiritual person without understanding something about psychic energy. And I hope what I've given you here is a good basic understanding. Always more than can be said, but then if you have a specific question, just ask me.